Hi again. C.H. Dodd, the authority of the Bible. Now, C.H. Dodd is not well liked by conservative Christians. He's not an inerrantist, number one. And if you know anything about his history, you realize he even dared to disagree with the Apostle Paul in his commentary on Romans, for instance. So he's not used and not liked by conservatives. But on the other hand, he's one of the most respected New Testament commentators of the last 100 years, and one of the most influential, a specialist on John, for instance. But he wrote much, and everything he read is very influential. So I thought to discuss his view of the authority of the Bible, specifically today the Canon, because there's much misinformation out there about when the Canon was selected, or created as some people would view it, and who did the creating, and exactly when did that happen. Well, C.H. Dodd was a congregational minister who became one of the greatest scholars of the century in these areas of researching the early church as well as the New Testament itself. So he's in a very good position to give a qualified answer. And here's what Dodd says about the growth of the canon. The New Testament consists of 27 writings, about 20 of which were already collected into a canon recognized in practically all parts of the church by the end of the 2nd century. Later additions to the canon came slowly. They were few and relatively unimportant. In the 4th century, Eusebius counts as acknowledged scripture the 4 Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, 14 Pauline epistles, including Hebrews, 1 John and 1 Peter, the Revelation being added with a note of doubt. This may be taken as representing the old 2nd century canon. He gives a second list of disputed writings, namely the epistles of James and Jude, 2 Peter, and 2 and 3 John. These complete our own canon. His third list contains books which had claimed canonicity at some period in one church or another, but were not ultimately accepted as scripture. Among these, he would like to include the Revelation, but is clearly aware that he has the general opinion against him. So this is Eusebius in the middle of the 4th century. Revelation has already been canonized, that is, accepted as authoritative by most churches, although he himself is against it. The rest are still known to us in whole or in part, and 3 of them are commonly read among the Apostolic Fathers, namely the Shepherd of Hermas, the Epistle of Barnabas, and the teaching of the 12 Apostles. The exclusion of these and the inclusion of their competition, which form Eusebius' second list, resulted from a long process of discussion and balancing of claims. The original canon, on the other hand, came into being by a process which we can no longer trace in detail. The grounds of canonicity alleged by the Fathers are not always convincing, and as in the case of the Old Testament canon, we may suspect that they were rather rationalizing an existing selection than freely applying or testing text. That is, freely applying tests. At bottom, the selection was instinctive. The church read as scripture those writings which it felt to be most vitally related to the spiritual impulse that created it. It did not at first regard these writings as specially authoritative because they were canonical. They became canonical because they had already made good their authority. So far as we are able to compare the writings of the original canon with their competitors, especially with those which were ultimately excluded, there can be no doubt that as a whole they stand spiritually, intellectually, and aesthetically on an altogether higher plane. By about AD 200, then, there existed a New Testament which substantially is ours. So what came to mind when I was thinking about Dodd's comments here is that what passes now for a truth about the canon, that it was somehow formalized, that is, created by the Roman Catholic Church around 400 AD, or even at the Council of Nicaea. That's one canard that's out there. All of that is, well, it's a half-truth. That is, that the Council of Carthage in 397 did formally approve a canon of 27 New Testament books. But the Council of Carthage wasn't the Roman Catholic Church. And 30 years before that, Athanasius had approved a canon of the same 27 books. So 367 that would be. And Athanasius wasn't a Roman Catholic. He was an Eastern Christian, that is, an Eastern Catholic. And that will be the subject of our next videos on the canon, and that this word Catholic confuses an awful lot of people. We'll deal with that more later. But enough to say for this one that one very wise man said that a half-truth is a whole lie. So if you give the impression that the creation of the canon was done arbitrarily by the Roman Catholic Church around 400 AD, you have lied. And that lie is out there, and it's everywhere. So I'll link to why JW.org will stand. No, sorry, messed that one up. Why JW.org will fall and the church will stand. This is a series we did on this very issue of the general apostasy from the standpoint of the parables of Jesus in Matthew 13. So the parable of the sower and the parable of wheat and tares are the first few videos of this playlist. So I'll put on the first of that series, why JW.org will fall and the church will stand, and the playlist also on your screen.